My friends, hello and welcome back to the fireside. I hope wherever you are, you're nice and cozy and comfortable and ready to settle in for tonight's speedrunning story. And in fact, it's the time of year now where one ponders the kinds of things like the ghosts of Christmas, past, present, and future. And I think tonight's story will have us pondering on such a thing because it is the story of a speedrunner who had quite a terrible brush with near death back in the year 2008. Quite a harrowing story, and it was posted onto the elite forums in that year 2008 and sort of lives on as this lesser known tidbit of speedrun lore and legacy. I think what's particularly interesting is, if you've watched a lot of speedrun content over the years, you will know the speedrunner involved in this story, a well documented story, and I will reveal to you at the end of the story who it is, So if you don't know, try to imagine who could this possibly be, and how history, God forbid, could have been different, and where speedrunning could have been entirely gone in a different direction. Because this is quite an influential speedrunner who this happened to at the time, and they would go on to be involved in quite a pivotal moment in the history of the community only a few years later. So here goes. This story takes place in Sweden in the year 2008, August, in fact. And this young speedrunner, probably around early 20s at the time, you're trying to balance a lot of things in your life, work, maybe relationships, probably school, and of course, you're looking for a few good hours of quality gaming time, in order to pursue these incredible world records. And indeed, this gentleman had set quite a few world records with more to come. And so on this date, August 11th, this person sets out to, do one of the tasks to get out of the way in order to pursue these other endeavors. And one of the tasks they have to do in Sweden that day is drive their car to a shop to get it, certified, safetied, that sort of thing. Now, by the sounds of it, they were at school, and so their kind of family childhood shop was maybe an hour drive away. But, you know the guy, you know the mechanic, he's not going to screw you. And so it's worth the drive in that sense rather than risking it with a new mechanic. And so this fellow drives out there and gets to the shop for his certification date. And the shop keeper says, "Sir, I'm so sorry, but your appointment is actually 2 days from now. It's not today. These things happen, and they're not a fun thing when they happen, but I'm sure we can all relate. We've all been there. You think something's one day, but really it's another day." And so, not to be too dejected and disappointed, our speedrunner, the protagonist in our story, starts driving home. Now, Sweden drives on the right, just like North America, most of the world. I actually looked this up. They switched in 1967. They were the last of the Nordic countries to switch over to driving on the right. They once drove on the left. So I was wondering if this was actually an important piece of the story, but it had 40 years. So you presume everyone in Sweden by this point is used to driving on the right. And by the sounds of it, our speedrunner was, in the right lane, a 2-lane highway, as one can imagine in these sorts of northern areas, and maybe trees and a hill off to the left, maybe a water feature, a lake, a river off to the right. And so he's driving on a 2-lane highway, and it's a little bit intense, but nothing that no one's used to, And so it was a 90-kilometer zone, so a fair bit, probably, a relatively major thoroughfare motorway. And lo and behold, he gets stuck behind a lorry. That's like a tractor trailer, an 18-wheeler in European speak. He gets stuck behind a lorry that's going about 60, 70 kilometers an hour and kind of swerving, acting a bit strange. Now, there's two things a good driver could do in this situation. They're both, I would say, fair things to consider. One is, lay way back, give it space, and kind of, stay away. Another thing, and it is a reasonable thing to do, is to pass the lorry as quickly and safely as possible if you can, and just get it out of the picture. Get it far away, get your space, and go on driving safely. And so our protagonist decides the latter. He's going to try to pass this lorry. So he gets into the left lane, the oncoming lane, where there's no traffic oncoming, and starts passing the lorry. Lo and behold, the lorry driver starts edging into his lane and performing essentially a pit maneuver. Any fan of these old cops shows or NASCAR will know of the pit maneuver. And so what ends up happening, believe it or not, according to the story, is that our protagonist gets pitted as he's passing, spins out through a rail into a lake. And so he's sitting there almost stunned, a 21, 22-year-old man, for a brief moment, one of those moments that presumably almost lasts a lifetime. And he says there's this water rushing into his car, like unbelievably. And he's thinking, like, what do I do in this moment? And again, probably it lasted a few seconds, but it's feeling like minutes. And it's like could this be it? And, I've heard from people in these sorts of situations that oftentimes you don't even consider that it could be it. You just kind of, you lock in and you know what to do. And in this case, the speedrunner cracked the door handle and pushed it as hard as he could and had enough room to get out and swim to shore. And it was August 2008, but he writes that he was quite cold and shivering. By the time he got to shore, the paramedics were there, doing things that one would typically expect, covering him with a blanket, checking his vitals. But the important thing is he made it out of this potentially watery grave. Imagine not an end that anyone would want to meet, especially when they're just probably driving home thinking, oh man, I messed up my car appointment. I gotta do this trip again in 2 days. Thinking about how he wants to speed run, Surface 2 00 Agent and go for an Untied there or whatever. And all of a sudden you're in this truly life or death situation. And he made it out onto the bank of this lake. And he said he never really figured out what happened to the driver, but he seemed to be, Eastern European, possibly Russian. He was hacking darts, smoking cigarettes. And he never really heard if there was any charges pressed or anything like that, if the fellow was intoxicated. But he was taken, the protagonist, the speedrunner, was taken to a hospital, checked in for a couple hours, just checked out, make sure there's no hypothermia or anything there. And eventually was sent on his merry way. And of course, as one would do in 2008 when you were a member of a community on the internet, he shared this story online, where we can still read it today. The thread is still up on the Elite forum, thank goodness. And, it's one of those things that even we shouldn't take that for granted, because we know that the Internet Archive and Wayback Machine have been attacked lately. And so, of course, this is why I enjoy telling these stories, to further cement them into the history and the lore of the world and of our community. And so if you haven't guessed or you've been pondering who the speedrunner is by now, it is a Swedish gentleman by the name of Henning Blom. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it's not quite a household name, but he was the fellow involved in 2012 in really the greatest incident of cheated and spliced speedruns in GoldenEye history, and really one of the most significant in speedrun history, because it was revealed sort of in conjunction with the growth of Twitch streaming and the explosion of speedrunning. And so it was kind of a first moment where people had to ponder exactly what to do and the scale of these sorts of incidents. And again, I'm describing this terrible story that happened to him in 2008, but in his case, he had spliced runs in 2011, which were ranked as untied world records for nearly 2 years. And this stood in contrast to people who, faked runs and they were on the ranks for a day or two before they realized, this was a stupid idea. I was being an idiot and revealed it, which was the more common thing to that point. And so it really makes me ponder, especially at this time of year, God forbid, despite the wrongdoings or misdeeds of people. And I mean, look, cheating and speedrunning, we know it's certainly not something to aspire to in this day and age. But compared to this sort of grim, truly near-death experience, I sit back and really wonder how this sort of thing shaped the man, and how it influenced his worldview and his view on everything in his life, including speedrunning. When you have an experience like that, some people shake it off as if nothing happened, truly, and other people get very deeply traumatized by these sorts of things. And so sometimes I wonder, did Henning maybe realize life isn't all about speedrunning and wasting your time getting 1,000 world record pace fails on Frigate Secret Agent, for example? Are there better things to be doing with one's life? And so do these experiences contribute to what ended up happening in his speedrunning career? And that's certainly something that I deeply reflect upon and deeply ponder. Now, of course, like I say, this thread is still there. All the comments, very short replies about just, we're thankful you're still alive and you're here. And it just really reminded me, reading this thread again, that indeed, again, we get into these spats online and all sorts of drama and whatnot, and it can feel like the biggest thing in the world, someone has betrayed you or someone has cheated or whatever. And when you really step back and think, and you put it in this context of a true life or death scenario, it really reminds me to just step back and kind of relax and realize that truly we are all human, we all are people, and that is the main thing. And certainly your health and well-being is number one beyond anything else. There's a saying out there, and maybe this might resonate with some of you, that the healthy man wants 1,000 things in life, all these dreams and visions and passions. But the unhealthy man, the sick man, only wants one thing, and that is to be healthy. And again, you just never know what battles people are facing, that people we interact with every day online. People keep these things to themselves, and I guess this time of year, you really get feeling the mood and a little bit wrapped up in the season. But, I guess my parting message tonight with this story being told is to, be kind and love your neighbors, certainly as much as you can. And you never know what we're all going through. You never know what we've been through. And certainly in this case, with old Henning Blom, I know certainly these days he's sort of considered this grand villain who got involved in this very iconic yet devastating splicing incident in speedrunning. And there's certainly a lot more to the man than that. And even though he's not around in the community these days anymore, certainly as I go about my day walking around and pondering life, I think about all these guys I've interacted with over the years. And certainly I do hope that they are doing well. And that includes perhaps you, if you've commented on my video anytime. Thousands, tens of thousands of people have. I hope whatever you've been through, whatever you're going through, that you're doing okay as well. So there's that story today by the fireside, the speedrunner's close brush with death, a near-death experience. I hope that certainly you are enjoying the mood of the season and are staying warm and cozy. And my friends, look at this beautiful scene here. I certainly hope to be back and upload a handful more of these episodes before the end of the year, before Christmas, because who wouldn't want to hear more stories right by the fireside here? So thank you all for watching, my friends. Wishing you the best of the season. Merry Christmas. Stay true, my friends. And I will see you next time by the fireside.